Welcome to this first class on perspective. So, what is perspective? The way I like to describe it is perspective is the way that artists have to display a flat object or a flat shape and give it the illusion of three dimensions. It also allows the artist to create depth within a drawing. And not only that, but also position an object in space in relations to other objects within the same scene and make it look believable, even though it is being displayed on a flat surface. I think a lot of artists would agree that perspective might seem a little bit daunting and a little bit boring because it involves a lot of calculations, at least it seems like it, to create accurate depictions of objects or people or building or anything in space, but it's actually a lot simpler than it might seem. And in this class, I'll try to explain as best as I can all the core concepts and all the core laws that govern perspective, and we'll take a look at things like the horizon line, vanishing points, convergence lines, and 1 and 2 point perspective. So quickly looking at this here, I think it's pretty fair to say that the majority of people will understand that these two shapes here are one and the same. So it's just a different point of view. So in this case here, you're just looking at this little brick here from the top. And then for this one here, you're looking at it kind of like from the side, as if it's laying on a table and you're just sitting on a chair next to it. Now, why does this work? Why does our brain tell us that this is okay? That even though those two shapes are completely different when you look at them, this one, has nice 90-degree angles. This one has none. They're all much bigger than that or smaller. Yet we're trained and we're used to looking at this and thinking, yes, those are the same bricks. So what I'll try to do with this lesson is to answer those questions. Why does this work? How does this work? We obviously have a lot of stuff to cover here, so let's get started. The very first thing we need to look at when studying perspective is the horizon line. So this is the most important point of reference you'll ever have when it comes to anything perspective related. So the horizon line essentially is the line where the sky meets the earth or the sea, more like the sea, because you can have mountains and things like this, kind of like getting in the way. But yeah, the horizon line is this nice horizontal line right here, where the sky meets the ocean. A quick thing to notice, right off the bat with this horizon line is, the closer things get to it in the image, the smaller they become. So, you might have a person that's really big right here, but the closer you get to the horizon line, the smaller, and then the smaller you'll appear. And you can see this in this example here with just the clouds. How this cloud here is pretty big in comparison to maybe like this one here, and those two might actually be the same size, and then this one back here might also be the same size, but they appear at least to be getting smaller and smaller as they get closer and closer to this line right here. So everything above the horizon line will appear to be to be smaller than everything below the horizon line as well. And then as you go away from the horizon line, things appear to get bigger and bigger. So another example, if we look at this here, those people here, people are a good point of reference because they are, generally speaking, the same size. There's not going to be one person that's like 6 feet, and then another person that's 20 feet tall. They're all about the same size, in comparison, relatively speaking. So, if we take this man right here, his height, so he's about this tall, and if we take another man that's about the same size, the same height, relatively speaking, this one right here, but if we look at those two distances here, this one versus this one right here, obviously one appears to be bigger than the other one, right? This one right here, getting closer and closer to the horizon line, appears to be getting smaller and smaller. And then it's even more apparent if we look in the distance here, the far distance, where people seem to be really, really small, almost like ant size. So in this case, the horizon line is a little bit challenging to know where it is, because it's full of buildings. So you would tend to think that the horizon line is probably right here. Let me change that to red so we can see it. So the horizon line is probably like something like this, but it's not. So this would be called wherever you see kind of like the sky meeting something, so meeting like mountains, or meeting buildings, or meeting the ground essentially. This is going to be, you can call it the visible horizon line, but it's not the real horizon line. The real horizon line is always at sea level, so it'll be lower than that. So you would have to imagine in this particular scene that there is no buildings whatsoever. So which is why it's a lot easier to spot in an image like this. Now that we've established what the horizon line is, if you didn't know before, one other thing that is very important about this particular line here in any image is that it's always at eye level. So what I mean by that is, if you were to be really, really, really tall and you looked straight ahead, you would still see the horizon, right here. It would still be the same. It would still be in the same place. Just a horizontal line right down the center of the image or your field of view. The same way as if you were an ant and you're, like or maybe not an ant, but like a crab or something, really, really close to the ground, and you were to look at the horizon, you would still see it the same way. Now, when you're looking straight ahead like this, so that your horizon line is right down the center of your field of vision, and in this case, the field of vision is represented by this red square, this red rectangle. This would be everything that you see. So when you open your eyes, this is all that you can see. So this is your point of view. This is your field of vision, and from this point of view, if you look straight ahead in front of you, your horizon line will be right down the center. So you'll have half the content of your field of vision up here, and the other half is going to be down here. Now, what happens if you change that point of view? So if you tilt your head to look at the ground a little bit more instead, so if we decide we're going to look at what's down here, look at what happens with the horizon. The horizon line suddenly, used to be in the center of your field of vision. Now it moved up. Now it's all up here. So what this means is that whenever you look down on something, the horizon line will shift up. And then if you do the same thing, but instead you look up to something, so if you're really small, for example, and the majority of the things that you can see that are interesting are above you, then you'll tend to look up instead. And when you look up, you see the horizon right here. Your horizon drops. It becomes lower. So this is a different point of view. All right, to demonstrate how the point of view, how important the point of view is when it comes to the horizon and how perspective is observed, I'm in a little street right here. So we're going to look at what happens. Right now I'm about the size of a person. So if I walk to this door, I'm a regular sized person. But we'll see what happens if suddenly, instead, I become really, really short. So just look at the overall scene right here and see how it changes based on my own point of view. So we're going to go down in this case, as if we were shrinking, or if we were a little kid. So suddenly I'm a lot closer to the ground, and everything is different. Everything that I used, suddenly I can see under those little roofs here. Before, when I was taller, I couldn't. All I could see was kind of like the side of it. But now, when I'm shorter, I can see, there's actually a kind of like a metal rod going down in the center of those. So I didn't see that before. So with a new point of view comes a new scene entirely. And in the same way, what happens if we become really, really tall? the point of view completely changes. Suddenly we're not looking underneath these little roofs, we're actually looking over them. So we're looking at the top of them, a point of view that we didn't have before when we were down here. So in this case, if I look straight ahead, what I'll see and where the horizon line is going to be will be about in the middle of the image. So right where the text sold here is written. So that would be the horizon that I see in this case. And that would be kind of like a good composition for this image. So you would have kind of have the image that is above the horizon, and then have the other part of the image that is below the horizon. But what happens if I shrink suddenly, if my point of view is from really close to the ground instead? Now suddenly this image is not as interesting anymore. I'm seeing a lot of ground, which is not that interesting to look at, and only a portion, kind of like the upper half portion of this picture, this photo, this image is actually interesting. My horizon is still in the middle right now because I haven't looked around, I haven't moved my head. So it's still right down the middle, about where the sidewalk is. So that would be my horizon right now. But this image is not really interesting. So what you do when this happens is you tend to look up a little bit. So a more interesting point of view would be something like this. I'm sure most would agree. This is way more interesting to look up like this and see more things than just have half the screen or half your entire field of vision used by just ground, up close ground like this, where you don't get to see much of the world around you. And this only applies if you're really short, if you're really close to the ground. If you're taller, like this, then if you look straight ahead, it's not so bad. You see a little bit of the ground, you see a little bit of the streets. It just feels like a more natural frame. And in the same way, if we go really, really tall and we still look ahead, then it feels like we're missing something. In this case, you would see kind of like the windows right there. That would be the second row of windows starting from the top. That would be kind of like where my horizon line is in this case. Not the most interesting perspective. So what you would tend to do instead is look down, so you get to see more things, more stuff, more of the scene that's around you, like this. So you would look down instead, and you would look even more down. The higher you become, the higher you get. Now, why do you need to know this kind of stuff? It's all about making good drawings. Remember, so if you are really close to the ground and you draw just what you see without changing your point of view, without tilting your head up to see more, to see something that's more interesting, then your drawing is not going to be as interesting. So the shorter you are, the more you're looking up, and the taller you are, the more you look down. And then anywhere in between, of course, you'll have to adjust your head depending. But that's the idea here. So to recap, the horizon line is the one line in the image that is going to be our key point of reference from where all the perspective is going to kind of originate from. It's going to dictate the majority of the perspective in the scene. And the point of view, or your eye level, is also when you look straight ahead, towards kind of like the horizon. If you look straight ahead, this is going to be your point of view, but also going to be the horizon line. But what you need to know is that your point of view can change. So like we've done, like we just did, if we look up a little bit more, now the horizon will be lower from your point of view. And if you're really, really tall, your point of view and your horizon will seem higher. Now, what do you do if you have an image like this and you're trying to do perspective for it? There's no horizon. And actually, how do you find the horizon? And this brings me to the next chapter, where we'll look at vanishing points and convergence lines. Alright, so now that we know about horizon and the horizon line, and we know about the point of view and we know that the horizon can move within a frame depending on the point of view of the viewer. Now we can start to use what we see in the image to find, or to help us find, that horizon line when it's not within the frame that we're looking at. And I keep saying, I've been saying frame, and this is kind of the vocabulary that I'll be using from now on to refer to what you can actually see. So in this case, this would be highlighted by the blue outline here. So this is all that you can see at any given time. Of course, if you move your head, or you can think of yourself also as a camera, because otherwise, as a human being, we have eyes, and we also have peripheral vision, so we can see a lot more than we can actually see within. For most cases, whenever you're doing a drawing, you're not going to be able to draw things that you see with your peripheral vision. You'll draw what you see as if you were looking at it through a window, very similar to looking at it through a camera. So that's why I'll be using that kind of vocabulary. So this, I'll be calling this like a frame. So everything that you can see at any given time, this is a frame, and you, the viewer, will be kind of like a camera looking at this and displaying this to on the screen. So within this frame here, if I look, it's really hard to imagine where the horizon can be. Because especially in this case, there's no horizon found within this frame. So this will allow me to introduce convergence lines. And what are those exactly? But convergence lines, we'll consider those to be straight lines that converge into one single point. So if I trace a bunch right here, so one line, another line, another line, another line, and you can see here they all converge into this one point right here. Right here. And this point, where all the convergence lines kind of lead to, where they all touch, where they all connect, this is going to be called the vanishing point. All right, we'll get to that a little bit later. But now, how can we use those lines to figure out the horizon? The beauty with all of this is that within any given frame, within any drawing, all the lines, or at least if you can find any lines, sometimes you can't if you're just looking at a like a landscape where there's no buildings, where everything is just like mountains and trees. So in that case, you'll be a little bit out of luck. But for anything that is constructed like this, anything that is human built, as humans, we tend to build things in simple shapes because it makes things easier to understand, makes things easier to build. So just the same way that houses and buildings are all built in at least most of the time, in a square format, in a cube format. Everything is just blocky, so it's easier to it's easier to place together. It's easier to organize. Most of the streets are in a grid format as well. So there's always exceptions, of course. But for the most part, everything is built straight. It's just simple. If all these buildings were kind of like wavy and round, and it would be much harder to build. It'd be much harder to just make work in real life. So lucky for us, everything is straight, and everything tends to line up. So especially in this case here, if you look at this image, there's just a lot of straight lines, you can just look at this sidewalk here, a really nice straight line right here. So if we trace that, if we use this one line and drag it all the way up here, and we use this line as we'll try to consider this one as a convergence line. And we'll see as a convergence line and see if there's any other lines in this frame that actually converge at the same point as this one here. So let's try another one here. So we can see here the top of the roof, or this little edge here, forms a really nice straight line. So we're gonna try to drag a line from this here and see where it lands. So that's about right. Like, it follows the edge of the building pretty well. All right, so interesting. So they seem, if you imagine those two lines like extending beyond the frame, I think most would agree that they would probably touch at some point. They would converge into one point because they're not parallel. Parallel lines, on the other hand, would be something like this, completely straight, one next to another. And those lines will likely never touch. because they'll just keep going on forever and forever, and they'll just always be at the same distance from one another, and they'll never touch, which makes them parallel lines, and they can be in any direction. So they could be, instead going horizontally. So those two horizontal blue lines right there, they would never touch either. They would just keep going on forever and ever and never end up touching each other at any point. And they can also be diagonal. So if I undo all these, so if I trace another line, for example, like this one right here, and then I duplicate this over like this, those two lines, once again, they will never touch. They go in the same direction. They will never ever touch. So it doesn't matter what angle they are, as long as they're parallel, they'll never touch. So those cannot be used to find the vanishing point. They'll never converge at any point. So those are kind of useless in this case. But if we look at this image again, those lines are not parallel. They're not, you can easily imagine them touching at some point. So what we're going to do here is we're going to extend the frame a little bit, as if we can suddenly see a little bit more of this entire scene. And then we're going to try again and make those lines, extend those lines beyond the frame and see where they touch. So I'm going to trace that again from here all the way here, this one too. And now I've just traced two lines, but we're going to find a couple more just to confirm this point here, where you can see here, where they touch, where they intersect. That would be the vanishing point. And also, this would happen to be the horizon point. So from there, you could trace a line like this, and that line, that red line, would be the horizon. And we're going to try to verify that. So let's find a couple more straight lines in here, so we can use the other side of the sidewalk, because we know that this is straight. At least it looks straight to me. So we're going to try. Drag it along the edge, see where it connects. Let's try to find another one. So we're going to use the trim here, the edge of this building. Try to extend it. We can do the same thing here with this one line here that looks like a straight line along the edge of the roof. And what you can see here is that those lines, when you extend them beyond the actual building and keep going, they all converge into one point. Not all vanishing points are on the horizon. I just want to put this out there. But there's always going to be one, at least one vanishing point on the horizon. And it's essential that we find this one point on the horizon, and it's essential that we find the horizon to be able to draw anything in perspective. In some cases, if you don't have an image, well, you'll be able to make that point up. You'll be able to place it wherever you want, and then you'll be able to draw anything you want from there. But if you have a drawing like this and you're trying to find where that horizon line is when it's not clearly visible in the image, let's say you don't have kind of like this ocean view where you can see the sky meets the ocean. In a lot of cases, you'll have to find that line yourself, and there's really easy ways to do that, and it is by using convergence lines. So now, being aware of what convergence lines are and being aware of vanishing points, what we can do now is create our own drawing. So with the horizon here placed, at a arbitrary spot, it really doesn't matter where within this frame, we can try our hand at drawing something simple like a train track. So what we're gonna do is figure out where our vanishing point is, and in this case, we're gonna start simple. We're gonna place it right in the middle, so right here. So this is going to be the vanishing point. We'll call it V1, vanishing point 1. Because there could be multiple ones. But in this case, we'll use a single vanishing point for a very simple perspective. And then what we're going to do is trace two convergence lines, starting from this vanishing point. And we're going to extend them all the way to the edge of the canvas. It doesn't matter where. You could extend them like this, or you could extend them right down the middle. Create a nice cone like this. Or maybe a little bit wider, something like this. All right, so we're gonna do this, and now it's a little bit hard to imagine this, but imagine this, all this thing here. This is going to be the train track. So as if it's going all the way to the horizon. So a really, really straight, long train track going all the way to the horizon. And now we're gonna draw like wood beams across those tracks. So something like this. You know, first wood beam. There we go. We have a nice wood beam right here. And now, if we remember, everything that gets closer to the horizon, like the closer that you get to the horizon, the smaller everything is. And this also applies for distances. So I'm going to draw another one that is closer to the camera, closer to your point of view, right here. So this is the first one that we'll see. This distance here is going to be shorter the next time around for the next batch of beam. And it'll get shorter and shorter and shorter as you get closer to the horizon. So we're going to draw this next beam right here. And you can already see like the distance between this one and that one. Now it's a little bit shorter. It's not the same. And I can prove this by drawing another one on top and moving it around, moving it over this one right here. So as you can see, it got shorter. That distance is not the same now. And then what we're going to do for the next one is the distance is going to get even shorter and shorter as you get closer and closer to the horizon line. And at some point they'll be so close that you won't be able to draw them. So it'll just look like they kind of just blur into one another. Just like that. All right, so that distance here, it just keeps on shrinking as it gets closer and closer to the horizon line. And now if you look at this, now it makes a little bit more sense. So now you can actually feel, you know, that this train track is going away in the distance. And then if you have some nice clouds, you can start to imagine a scene. So this is a very simple scene, but the scene is in perspective. You have a train track in here, and it actually works in perspective. So this is actually correct. And from there, you can do a lot of different things. And by the way, what we call this, when you have a single vanishing point in the image, is a one-point perspective. And we're going to take a look at this a little bit more in detail in the next chapter. Let's now take a look at the simplest way to create perspective, to create the illusion of depth, and that is with a one-point perspective system. So with one vanishing point and one only. But actually, before I get to that, I want to also kind of like show another way to draw another example, which is going to be with 0-point perspective. So there's not going to be any vanishing point, and when there's no vanishing point, when everything in the drawing has just parallel lines, no convergence line, no vanishing point, nothing like that, this completely eliminates perspective from a drawing. So the drawing will look flat, or the photo will look flat, and this would look something like this. So for example, you can look at this train track here, and you obviously cannot tell any kind of perspective with this. All the lines are parallel lines, like we've seen before. Anything that is parallel, in this case, all those lines here, they never touch. They will never touch. They'll just keep going on forever and ever and be at the same distance from one another. And this means that there's no perspective going on with this. The same can be said with an example like this. Use the imagination here, but those would all be like buildings on the street, right? So you have the street, you have the street down here, and those are all the building 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those look flat. They're not in space. You can't tell how thick they are, how far back they go. They just look like kind of just cut out, right? Piece of paper that you just cut out and slapped on that canvas. Now the absence of perspective does not mean that there's no horizon line. There still is. In this case, it's going to be again where the sky meets the land. So for this particular drawing, it would be that line right here. So this is going to be the sky, and everything below this line, this is where the buildings are going to be sitting on, essentially. That red line here is going to be the horizon. But that's it. The horizon line is not going to be used for anything else. It's just going to tell you that, okay, everything that sits on here is in the air. It's above the ground, and everything underneath that is below the ground. But that's as far as it goes. But with this, you can still fake some sort of perspective. So let's say, we want to add some extra buildings and give the illusion that there's something behind there. Without using actual perspective. Now, if we take a look at this, now this becomes a little bit more interesting. So we can see here the car that I added in the foreground, and by foreground I mean anything that is closer to the camera. So you can imagine like foreground, midground, and then background. So everything that's in the back is going to be in the background. Everything that's in the mid plane, in the in the center of the scene is going to be on the midground, and then everything that's really close to the camera, really close to the viewer's eye, is going to be called the foreground. So in this case, this car here, since it's closer to the camera, it appears at least closer because those two cars are obviously the same size, not the same size, but the same shape, and they're likely the same brand. But since this one is bigger, it feels like it's closer to us than this one here. And why is that? Well, if we remember, everything that gets closer to the horizon line, even though in this particular scene there's no real perspective, if you still consider that, if you still consider that everything that gets closer to this line here will get smaller and smaller and smaller, then you're able to still kind of fake the still fake some sort of depth in this image without having actual perspective. Now, if we want to introduce a simple perspective to a drawing, how do you achieve that? Well, we know that we'll need a focal point and the horizon line. Now, let's create an arbitrary horizontal horizon line. So this is going to be the red line in this case. Now with Photoshop, it's really easy to deform an object. So we can actually do this really quickly this way. So we're gonna do a transform on this railroad. All right, there we go. So now, having deformed the same railroad, all we did, is instead of having parallel lines, what I did is I did a transform where the lines that used to be parallel, the lines that used to be like this, what I did is just did a transform so that the two lines instead touch at the top like this, creating two convergent lines instead of two parallel lines. And what this creates is the illusion of depth. So now it actually looks like this railroad is going somewhere far in the distance. And where is this going? It's going, as we know, to the vanishing point that is on the horizon. Now, the way I created those train tracks was a little bit of cheating was involved, right? Because I did it using the Photoshop tool. I just deformed something that was in no perspective whatsoever, something that was flat, and I deformed it and then gave it perspective this way. But what if you want to actually be able to draw your own things, your own objects in perspective, so that you can create some cool drawings? The way to do this is we're going to start by using the vanishing point. So just like the vanishing point here works for those railroads, those train tracks, we can create some extra lines here to help us in creating a box. So maybe the box is going to be somewhere around here. And with 1 point perspective, what's really important to know is that the only convergent lines in the drawing will be those originating from the vanishing point. Every other line, every single other line in the drawing will be parallel to one another. So you can observe that already with the beams here. So those wooden planks, all parallel lines, as you can see here. And you can trace all the other ones. They're all going to be parallel. And right now they look a little bit flat, but if we wanted to give some depth to these planks, we could add a little bit of depth like this, you know, as if they have some thickness. And those lines, again, they would be parallel to the lines that were there already. And those lines are going to be the horizontal lines are going to be parallel, and the vertical lines as well. So to create the base of the box, what we're going to do is we're going to draw horizontal lines that are straight, so parallel, from one end of these convergent lines to another. So we're going to create two like this. All right, so parallel lines, these are parallel, they'll never touch. But we stop at the convergent line limitation. Now we're going to give this box a height. So right now it has a width, it has a depth, right? So this is the depth, this is how deep the box is going to be. And this is how wide it's going to be, right? From one end to another. And then if we were to look at this from a top view, just like the railroad before, you know, used to be what used to be a rectangle like this is now this shape here. Is now a shape like this instead. It's the same wood beam, it's just seen in perspective. So it doesn't have those nice 90-degree edges anymore. Instead it has these smaller angles and at the bottom here, and these bigger angles at the top. So this is not quite 90, this is maybe I don't know, maybe 110 degrees, and this is maybe like 70, something like that. But still, it is the same object. So knowing this, we know that if we were to look at this shape here from the top view, it would be still a rectangle. But now we're seeing it in perspective, so it looks kind of like this deformed diamond. But now that we have the width and the depth, now we can create the height of the box. And then this again can be completely arbitrary. So I'm going to just draw a line from here to about here. So this is going to be how high my box is. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And I want the line to be the same on the other side because, you know, the box is going to be even. It's going to be a nice box. It's not going to be all wonky. And then I can close this. So this is one side of the box. This is the front side of the box. This is exactly the same as this side here that I'm looking at right now. This face now is the same as this here. Right? This is, you know, those wooden beams here, they're essentially just really flat, long boxes. That's exactly what they are. So now I can create the other sides of the box. And now that we have an extra corner here, we can use another convergent line. And we can start it from here. Start from the vanishing point and touch the corner. So we can keep going, and we can keep going all the way. As long as you touch the corner, and you'll want to touch all corners. So far, if we look here, it touched one corner right here, touched this corner of the box, and then it touched that corner of the box. We want to make sure that we touch this corner as well and that corner as well. And this is going to allow us to complete this box. So I'm going to trace this convergent line and make sure that it touches the corner of this box and that it touches the other corner as well. And now all we have to do is connect the dots. I know that to create this side of the box, all I have to do is go from here and trace a vertical line parallel to this other one, because we remember that except those blue convergent lines, everything else should be parallel. Everything else should be straight, completely straight, either vertical or horizontal. So I'm just going to go up, 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 up until I touch the new convergent line that I created, and then we can connect those two here. So this is going to be the other side of the box. I can connect the bottom as well. And for the top, we can start from this corner here, and then another horizontal line all the way to the new convergent line that we created until it touches it. Click, and that's it. That will be the limit of the box, and then we can again connect those two lines right here. And now, of course, I can connect this one to here, and connect this one to here. But now the box looks kind of transparent. So, you know, if we want to erase those lines in the back, that the facade of the box would kind of cover. And what we're left with is a box in three dimensions, and we can erase all the convergent lines, you know, if we're done. Of course, you could have this on a different layer to make it easier for you to erase afterwards, clean up your drawing. But you know, for the demonstration, for the purpose of this this demonstration, this works just fine. And then there we go. We have a nice box in the same perspective as the railroad, because we know it originates from the vanishing point that is common to all the objects in the scene. And using convergent lines, we're able to create a new object in proper perspective within the scene. And now I've created something that sits on the ground, but I can do exactly the same thing with anything else that that might be floating in the sky, for example, by just creating those initial lines, connecting the two sides like this, and then coming up with a arbitrary, you know, height for the box. So maybe something this big here. I want to make sure that those two sides are the same. Like this. So that creates a nice rectangle. And then we're gonna remember, touch again the new corner that we just created with a new convergent line, and then touch the other corner with a new convergent line, and then we can just connect the dots using parallel horizontal or vertical lines. And touching it, so it has to be the same corner here. And now we can connect those two lines. A new horizontal line until it touches the new convergent line. There you go. And then we can close this just like that. Connect the lines that are missing and erase the inside construction lines of this box that we don't need anymore. And there we go. We're left with another box in perspective in this environment that works just as well. So to quickly illustrate those same sides, so this is going to be this side right here, which is also going to be, you know, this side on the wood beams. And then if we look at the right side of the box, which is going to be right here, that would be this same side here for this one box. And for the case of this wood beam here, since it's completely centered and we don't get to see those edges, those sides, then I can't really draw it. And then the top of the box would be this one here. And we can notice that for this box here that's floating above the horizon, we can't see the top here. We cannot see what's above, because from our point of view, for this particular scene, it's not possible for us. So if I were taller, if we were much higher, then we might be able to see it. But in this case, we can't. And the green here also represents, you know, the top of the wood planks right there. And now we can also, you know, create a new color, maybe orange, for anything that is below the box. And this case here is going to be the only case where we can actually see underneath the box, because it's floating in the air above the horizon line. So this is this is how you do it. This is how you create one point perspective. This is how you place objects in a scene. Of course, you can create all kinds of objects. Right now I've created just cubes. So I would start with that, make sure that you're really comfortable doing really simple cubes like this, and then we can move on to more challenging things. But before we up the challenge, let's take a look at 2-point perspective now. Introduce a second vanishing point and see what happens. Two-point perspective is exactly what it sounds like. So instead of having just one right here and then having a bunch of parallel lines that will never touch, instead we're going to have two vanishing points. So let's put a random one right here. And then when you do this, you want to make sure that the vanishing point is cut far enough. You know, you don't want them to be too close, otherwise the image is going to be pretty distorted. So we'll do the two examples. We'll do the right way, and then I'll show you what happens when you do it the wrong way. We'll see why it looks wrong. So this is a little bit arbitrary, but we're gonna put one right here, then another one right here. All right, so as we know, just like in the first example with 1 point only, all the convergent lines are going to originate from these 2 points. So just the same way, we're going to start exactly the same way as we did with this one here. So we're going to go ahead and select a blue color. And then I'm going to start with the simplest shape possible, another cube. So we're going to go ahead and have those lines kind of go towards each other. All right, so I don't want to go this way, and then I don't want to go the other way either. I want the convergent lines to go towards the other point. So starting from here, starting from straight down, we don't want to go straight down, because straight down, if we go straight down for both, then we're just going to create 2 more parallel lines that will never touch, and that's not going to work. So instead, we want to have lines that are going to go towards each other and meet somewhere in this area here so that we can draw it. So of course, if the convergent lines meet all the way down here, then it's going to be a little bit hard to draw, to draw something. It'll have to be really, really big in the screen, and that's not going to be that convenient. So instead, what we're going to do is have those convergent lines kind of, like land around here. So we want them to cross around the center of the white space right here. These lines are going to be green instead. And we're going to have them cross in the center, right about there. It doesn't have to be right in the center, but we'll do that for now. And I can create another one, because it's going to be the other side of the box. And then another one, another blue one as well. And then we can see here, the little kind of like diamond that it gives us in the center right here. This is going to be the base of our box, right? So this section here, this zone here, this is going to be the same as this right here. So the same orange part here. But of course, since the box is going to be above ground, we're never going to see this, but this is the part that touches the floor. So we can start and give this an arbitrary height. So we're going to start by tracing kind of like the base for it. So one side, 2 side. And then to create the height, you really don't have to pick one side in particular. You can use any one that you want. So you could start this way. I like to start from the center. So we're going to go about this high. So this is going to be the height of the box. And then once we have this, now we can trace our next convergent lines and touching the top right here. So the top of the line, and another one that touches the top of the line, just like that. Now from here, we can start to connect the dots again. So I'm going to start this corner here. This is the outside of the box, and I'm going to go all the way up and touch the new convergent line. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here. Touch the new green convergent line coming from, we're going to call this vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2. So now we can connect those 2 sides here. And this is going to give us 2 sides of the box. And now to get the top of the box, to be able to wrap this up, to close this off, we'll select that color again, trace another line that's going to land right at the top of that corner right here, and the same deal on the other side as well, just like that. Top of the box, corner of the box, and then we can close this with the black color. And there we go, we have our box. So if we look around here, so this could be the red, this would be the blue, and this would be the top of the box. So as you can see here, this is a lot more dynamic. This feels a little bit flat because there's one side, the one side that is facing us, that is facing the camera, is always going to be completely flat. Just like this one here, this little rectangle here is just, really, really thin rectangle. It's a flat rectangle still. There's no weird angles to it. It's all 90-degree angles, just like it is right here, and just like it is right here. So this, even though it's in perspective, still looks kind of flat. So yeah, essentially 2-point perspective is just, it's a more dynamic perspective. It makes for a more dynamic image. Most of the time, more interesting to look at. But this is it. I mean, this is 2-point perspective. It's very simple. Now, what happens if we take those 2 points, those 2 vanishing points, and we bring them closer together? So we're going to see. In this case, the box works pretty well. You know, it looks just about right. Looks like a box. But what happens now if those 2 vanishing points are a little bit too close together? So we're going to try that. Going to bring it together. Together. Now, this is what tends to happen. So even though all the convergent lines are correct, and you know the box is properly built, it just looks completely distorted. It doesn't look like a box anymore. It looks like a really tall kind of it looks like a tall rectangle maybe. But as we remember, this box used to be wider than it is tall. And now if we deform it too much, if we bring those 2 vanishing points too close together, then it deforms the result. And this is a kind of like a warped perspective. It just doesn't work well. So this would be a bad example. As a general rule of thumb, what you'll want to avoid is to go any lower than 90 degrees when the convergent lines touch here at the very bottom. So those 2 right here. So in this case, let's try to see what we have. So what I'm talking about here is this angle right here. So what we want to avoid is anything beyond a 90-degree angle, right? So this is about 90 degree right there. So you don't want to go any lower than this. So if you go like this, that's probably going to distort it too much. If you go like this, then even more. So try to stay at 90 degree. You know, when the lowest convergent lines touch, try to make sure that this doesn't go beyond 90 degrees. There's always exceptions, and it might still work in some cases, but to be safe, to make sure that nothing looks too distorted, try to follow this rule. 2-point perspective really allows to make some really cool stuff. It's still fairly simple to manage. You know, it's only 2 vanishing points. I mean, it does take double the amount of convergent lines. As you can see here, it takes 8 to create a box instead of the 4 that it took us for this example here. So it's double the work in that sense, but for the level of dynamism that you can create with this kind of perspective, it's really well worth it. Now you might be wondering, what happens if you're trying to draw something that's not a cube, something that's not square? And what I always do, and what I recommend, and what most people do at least, is to draw simple shapes first. So you always start with cubes if possible, and then what you'll do then is you'll sculpt the cube. So you can remove some parts to it. Let's say I want one of this side of this cube to be chiseled, for example. So what I could do here is maybe just erase after the fact. So erase some part of it. So something like this. And I can bring this down, still following the convergent lines. You know, you don't want to deviate from that. So instead you could do something like this, and then this would be another edge, as if, you know, one of the corner got cut off. So that would be a different shape right there. And then if you wanted to add a curve to one of the sides, for example, you know, let's say we'll try to add a curve to this other side right there. Well, what I can do is draw a curve at the top. So for the top portion of the shape, and then down here, I'll try to draw the same curve. So of course, you know, the perspective is different. As you can see here, the curve is going to be much more intense than it's going to be here because the perspective is different. It gets more and more tight as you get closer and closer to the horizon line. But what you can do is you can still do some marks like this and try to gauge, okay, so this is about in the center here, so the middle of the curve is going to be about in the middle. And then this here, the curve touches the side at about this point right here, and the other side about right here. So now you have 3 points. You have 1 point right here, 1 point right here, 1 point right here, so you can easily connect the dots, create that curve as well as you can. There you go. And now what you would do is just erase the stuff that you don't need. So you can erase this all the way down. Don't need that stuff. And then we can fill this up with blue again to clean it up. And there you go. Now you would have your new shape, your curved shape for that corner. So it's doing exactly the same thing. So you're just, you're still using the same lines. You're still using parallel lines when you can. Because in this case, all the vertical lines, as you can see here, if you haven't noticed yet, they are all still parallel lines. So when it comes to time to edit, and to make some modifications to these shapes here, everything that goes up, everything that's as high as it gets, you can always go straight down and it'll always be correct. So if you want to write like an M or something, you can go like this, M straight up, and then still on the other side here, M straight up. Follow the convergent lines right here, the blue one, and then you can go down and then back up. Then there you go. That would be kind of accurate. And then so you can do a bunch of different things. You can modify the shape, but I always suggest that you start with simple shapes first. So start with a really, really rough sketch of just a bunch of cubes placed in space, and then once you're happy with the placement of everything, now go in and detail, and then detail, and then detail some more. So just like the buildings, all the buildings are generally just big squares, big boxes. So draw them as big boxes first, and then once you're happy with their perspective, their location, their position, then you can go in and start adding a little bit more details. So we're just getting started with perspective. There's a whole lot more that we need to cover, but this is going to be for the next class. This is going to be a wrap for perspective 1. This exercise is going to be all about 1-point perspective. So the very first thing we want to do here is create a new file. So you could very well be doing this on a sheet of paper if you want, if you're not used to Photoshop just yet. But if you are, might as well go ahead and get even more used to it, even more comfortable in there. So if you are going to use Photoshop for this or any other similar software, let's go ahead and start with creating the canvas for this. So what I like to start with is kind of like a 4K resolution, double the 1080p that we talked about. So this is double 920 by 1080p, and we're going to go with this because this also means that it's going to be displaying at full resolution on a 4K monitor. So my approach to file size here is you always want to at least meet the minimal kind of like the minimum resolution that people will be viewing this on. And right now, 4K monitors are getting more and more common. So this is kind of like the minimum that you'll want to work with in terms of file size if you're going to be displaying this on the internet. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK with that. All right, there we go. So a couple of things here before we begin. The topic of this exercise is going to be a room. So we're going to be drawing a room in perspective, but only with one vanishing point. So a 1-point perspective drawing. Now, what do we need when we start this? So a little bit more about the topic also. So as I said, it's going to be a room, but it can be any room, and it can be a room in your house. So you can take a photo and kind of just, try to replicate that with 1-point perspective for your drawing. Or you can take a room in your house and kind of futurize it, so sci-fi it up, or maybe turn it into a medieval or a fantasy room, with similar layout, but obviously with a different kind of flavor to it. Or you can just keep it the way it is, keep it simple. And of course, the level of complexity in your drawing will vary depending on how experienced you are with this or how comfortable you are with this. And so the first things first here is you'll want to place your horizon and place your vanishing point. So those are are going to be essential if we want to be able to draw anything after that in correct perspective. And for the horizon, in this case, it can be anywhere you want. So it can be, the only thing that I will ask is that you place the horizon within the canvas. So you don't want it to be outside the canvas for this one. It's going to be a little bit simpler. So I am going to create a new layer in this case, and I'll call it guides. And this is going to be the layer that has the horizon on it. So we're going to go ahead and draw this on here. So we can select the random color and trace a horizontal line. So when you're drawing, you can just hold shift and it'll do a straight line. So it's pretty useful. Or you can just click here, select the shape that you want, and select like a line tool. Give it a size, a width. So something like 2 in this case, it should be big enough. And then if it's not set yet, change it to pixels. So we're gonna look at shapes and paths later. But for now, select pixels. So you'll be able to draw actual pixels. It'll be just like a straight line that you draw with your pen, just like that. So let's start with the horizon. So in this case, I'm gonna go with something. For this demo, we're gonna go with something pretty straightforward. So something right down the middle, right about here, maybe a little bit higher. And actually, let's make that, yeah, a little bit higher, so that we have kind of a more of a top view of the room, as if we were a little bit taller. And we are going to place the focal point, vanishing point, excuse me, and this is going to go in the we're going to place it around the center of the canvas. It doesn't have to be right in the middle, but somewhere around there. Actually, yeah, let's place it right here, and then somewhere in this region. And then now we are ready to start with this. So the first thing we'll want to do is create the boundaries of the room. So the first guides, we're going to trace them in the corner here of the canvas, just like that. And with this, we'll be able to draw kind of like the back wall of the room. So I'm just going to go ahead and do something random here. So we have the guides here, and we don't want to be drawing on this because we'll get rid of this at some point. And then if you're not using Photoshop, you can use a different color pencil. So maybe like a light orange or light blue, something like that. And then you'll be drawing on top of it all with a darker pen, just like a regular pencil. So in our case, we'll be drawing on the background layer here. And yeah, keeping it simple. So we're not gonna use layers or anything like that. We're gonna keep it as close as possible to just a regular traditional drawing, just to, remove any technical difficulties that might arise by the fact that we're using Photoshop. So of course, if you're used to Photoshop, go ahead and use layers if you want. But in my case, I'm just not gonna. All right, so we're gonna draw the kind of like the back wall for this. So this is going to be the limitation of the room, the limitation of my background. So very simple. We're just gonna trace straight lines, and then they should also line up with those convergent lines that we've drawn right here. So this is going to be the back wall of my room, and then since we're inside the room, we're not going to be able to see the other wall, so the opposite wall to this one, because it's going to be behind us. If we're the camera looking into this room, it's going to be behind the camera. All right, so we're not going to be able to see it. Starting with this, so a couple things that I'm going to be including in here. So I have, what I'm going to do in my case, I'm going to do a kind of like a bedroom with like a sci-fi bedroom with some weird like techie bits here and there. But essentially I'll have, a wall, a couple windows, and then shelves, and that's going to be pretty much it. And then, I'm going to start with this really big rough shapes, and then we're going to go into more details and kind of just like once we're done with the perspective, when the perspective is set in the room, once it's populated, I'm gonna go in and then add some more details. And you'll see with the details, you don't actually need to use these convergent lines. You don't need the guides anymore. Because you will have like a bunch of other lines already drawn in there that we'll be able to use as reference. And then one more thing that I really want to stress here is the to have correct sizes in here. So I don't want my bed to be like way too big for a regular person or way too small, and I don't want my bed to look really big or small compared to like a chair or like a desk or something like that. So to be able to keep believable proportions throughout the image, it's good to establish a guide first, kind of like a unit that we'll be able to use and to measure things. So in this case, we can imagine normally walls are about 2.5 meters high, like the ceiling for most houses. I'm just averaging here, but you can probably consider this distance here to be about 2.5 meters, or something like 8 to 9 feet tall, right? So what we're going to do here is, knowing that this is 9 feet tall, so this distance here from top to bottom in a straight line, this is about 9 feet tall, or 2.5 meters. What we're going to do is determine where a human, like a regular, like maybe like a 6-foot person, would land on here. So how high would that person be? So knowing that this is about 9, if we split it in thirds, so maybe like this and like this. Doesn't have to be like super accurate, but the more accurate the better. So yeah, in thirds, about this much. So this means that a regular person would land somewhere right above the horizon line if they were standing straight. So this would be in the scene here at this level of the room right there. So meaning that I'm gonna draw the head again. So I'm gonna draw this right here. Actually, I'm gonna place that. Yeah. So we'll leave it on this guide right there, because it's good to have on the image at all time. So let's say this is the top of the head for that person. So we know that a regular person is about eight heads tall, right? And so what I'm gonna do here is split this in half, split this in half, this in half, and then again, so we can kind of recreate the correct proportions for a human being. So really quickly, you don't want to go into too much detail here, but this is going to be about, the crotch is going to be about right here. So we have a person like this, standing. All right, and that would be somewhat an accurate representation of a person fitting in this room. Of course, that person would be much smaller. If we're all the way back here, it would appear smaller at least, but we could do the same thing. So if we want to draw someone in here, as long as we have this reference here based on the real height, the real dimensions of this room, knowing that this person is 6 feet tall, what we can do now is, if we know that the bottom here is going to be, this line here is going to be where the feet land. This is how tall the person would be, and then maybe a little bit extra above the horizon line for the head. We know that another person would be, about this size, right? So the first thing I'm going to do with this is draw a bed for this person. So I'm going to go ahead and measure kind of like a correct size bed for this one. So this distance here is about 6 feet. So I'm going to go and draw something that's about 7 feet. So that would be maybe this long. So that looks about right. And then what we can do with this is go back to our guides and extend the edge of the bed to know where it would land on the side here. So we know now we have the side of our bed. It's gonna look something like this. Oops. All right, so this is the angle that it's going to be in. And right now the bed is this is kind of just the shadow of the bed on the floor. So if we want to bring this bed up a little bit, to give it some height, then we can extend this upwards like this. And then this is going to be the height of the bed. And we can move that all the way to the other side here and extend that line again to create kind of like this big flat box. And once more, I'm going to go and extend the line here, touch the corner. So very, very similar to what we did with when we drew the cube in perspective. We're all starting with just big cubes. That's the only thing we're going to do at this point. So you can think of anything that we draw right now as just a big cube, something like that. And then connect this side here. All right, and maybe the bed would stop like something. Let's say it's a wide bed. It'll stop around here. We can draw this line going down. Then we can start to erase a couple things here that we don't need anymore. So we're not going to see that line. We're not going to see the back of the bed, so we can erase it. And there we go. Now we have kind of like a mattress sitting in the room, and in correct size. Maybe the bed's a little bit big for this guy, but yeah, I don't know. He's rich and he bought a big bed, a big king size bed. All right, so now we have our first piece of furniture. So we're going to go ahead and create something else. So let's go ahead and add some cupboards maybe. So I'm going to go down here and maybe start them from about here. So for furniture that is dependent on real human proportions, like the bed, it's good to measure things, but for other things like the size of the storage compartments or things like that, where the size really doesn't matter, you don't have to calculate and be as precise when it comes to their size. So maybe right above his bed here, I'm gonna add something. All right, so I'm gonna extend. Maybe I'll start all the way back here. So something like this, and then go down. See how far down it goes, maybe all the way down here. And now I need some extra guides now that I have like my two corners, and by that I mean like these two corners here. So you always start by tracing or by drawing what is flat, from your point of view, and from there you add the necessary guides and then extend the convergent lines to find the correct perspective for this. All right, so the corners of this thing would extend this way. I'm going to use a straight line for this. Why not? All right, extend this all the way here. And then we can erase this stuff here because we're not going to see that anymore. All right, and so as we can see here from this point of view, we're not going to be able to see underneath this storage compartment, and we're not going to be able to see the top of it because it's laying flat on the ceiling. But I can definitely add some separations here for the different like doors that are going to be on this thing here. So maybe something like this, maybe another separation down here. So this is all random what I'm doing here. Maybe the doors in the back here are going to be bigger, maybe the shape will change a little bit. But now we have a storage compartment there that's taking up a little bit of the room. We're going to add maybe like some sort of vent on the top of the ceiling, and then maybe some lights. So I'm going to go and draw some extra guides here because I don't have anything on the ceiling right there. So maybe the vents are going to go like this, and then there's going to be some lights as well. Maybe following this. Yeah, so let's start with that and see what we can create with this. All right, so this is going to be kind of the shape of the lights. I'm going to start them there. They're going to extend all the way down here. Maybe they're going to be cut in the center, something like this. And then we'll have this big like air filtration unit maybe, that is not straight but maybe zigzags a little bit, so we'll extend it something like this, and then it goes all the way back here, maybe touches the wall and goes down a little bit, maybe something like that, and then that would come back up here, so maybe about like this. So since the line here, the convergent line is already touching, I don't have to draw an extra one. So I can just add this one here, maybe a little bit higher too. So maybe something like this. And then this would go like that, maybe touch here. So what I'm doing with this is going to be kind of like an L. So I'm gonna need an extra couple lines here. Ooh. One touching the corner, another one touching this corner here. Okay, I'm gonna close it this way, and I'm missing another line here for this corner right there. It's taking me a little bit here to figure out what I wanted to do with this. So normally, you know, like you see right there, it's just two big rectangles, two big long boxes, one that is smaller, and then one that's much longer that goes all the way to the back of the room. So yeah, it took me a little bit to figure out what I want to do, but there you go. So now we're starting to have a room that's, you know, that is looking more and more interesting. So those lights here, I'm gonna close those shapes as well. All right, and then for the left side of this room here, the ceiling is actually going to be rounded. So what I'm gonna do is starting from down here and coming all the way to maybe this point right there, I'm gonna create a nice curve for this. So something like that. And it's going to be the shape of this wall on this side. So I'm going to draw another line to delimit where the curve begins here on this little dot right there. So this is where the curve starts, and then it ends all the way up here. So I'll draw this as close as I can here. So I'm going to take the point here, and the last point that I can use for this convergent line, and then in here, this point right there, I'm going to trace a what I'm going to try to do here is, let me change the color so that's a little bit easier to see. What I want to do is draw this shape here, but up close. See what this shape looks like up close. So with this, now I notice that I am missing an extra line. So the line is going to be touching this corner right there. So I'm going to touch this right here. All right, and then we can finish this shape here, but make it bigger since it's closer to the camera. So this shape, this line is going to touch that line right there. So this point up here is the same as this one. This point down there is the same as this one. And then what we'll want to do is go touch the wall where that line meets right there, horizontal line, all the way until it touches the convergent line. And then we know that if we join this line to this one here up there, it's going to be the same shape as this in the back. Of course, now the curve is not going to be the same if we just eyeball it. So what we can do is trace maybe a diagonal to give us some extra information there. So I'm going to do another color, maybe green. We'll turn this into a square. So where does the line land if this is a square and we trace a diagonal like this? So on this line here, if we split it in half, so the center of this rectangle will be about right here. So we can do the same thing here. We can start with a rectangle, just like this. And now we're going to trace a diagonal from here, from this corner, all the way down here. And then we'll see where that curve lands on that line, that same line. So if we look back here, and we split this line in half, so we're right about here. It's about the halfway point of this line. It's about another halfway point, right? It's about like a quarter where the line meets. So if we split this in half again, right about here, this distance, split it in half. So that curve, that same curve here, would land right about here. So now we have 3 points, so it's a little bit easier to create a curve for this. So we're gonna make sure that when we draw that line, we need to first curve until it touches this, and then keep curving until it lands right on that corner right there. And what this will do is that it'll give us a curve that's really similar to this one here. It's not gonna be perfect. We could add some extra guidelines in here, but for the sake of this, it should be more than enough. So I'm gonna go back here and try to make a nice smooth curve using those 3 points that I've figured out now. So something like this, maybe? Alright, so no, I'm just gonna go ahead and erase this black line here. It's annoying me. And I'm gonna add some windows. So I don't want to get rid of those guys just yet, because I'm gonna be drawing the window now, but a curved window to follow this, the curved wall. So what I am going to do is maybe the window is gonna start right, maybe a little bit lower. So I'll extend this. I'm gonna draw another guide. For the bottom of the window, another convergent line that will limit the bottom of the window. So maybe something here. And then I know that this is going to be the lowest point of the window. Then it'll start right about here, go straight up until this point here, and then it'll start to curve. And then maybe it'll end back here. All right, so what I want to figure out now is where to end the line. So I know that at some point, it's going to land on this convergent line right here, like this one curve here, this big one. And so we need to figure out what a square for this would be, what a rectangle would be. So all the way up here to the corner of the room, and then straight until it touches this convergent line. All right, right here. So we know that, and then I'm going to do the same thing for this with this one here. So all the way up here, and then horizontal until it touches. So the end of this curve is going to be here. All right, so now all I have to do is kind of trace a nice line like this, and then touching the top one. So I can help myself with drawing a guide here. It's going to go like this, touch, and then right there. And the way I'm able to figure out where this point is I'm just taking, because the perspective changes, right? Those two lines are not parallel, so they become closer and closer as they get towards the roof, because my point of view is not right down the middle. So the way to figure out kind of like where this point is going to be, you can take distance here, you can take this distance, and then this distance, and kind of average, where this would land in the center. So this distance, the average of those two is maybe this distance here. So that sounds about right. All right, this is bigger, this is smaller, and this is even smaller. So that looks about right. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but that should help us trace the line as accurately as possible. So now I'm going to touch this and then keep going until I meet the other point right there. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one right here, this curve right here. So it goes up here. All right, so now I have the edges of my windows. Now I can hide a couple things and erase some lines here that I'm not going to need anymore. So I can erase those lines because we're not going to be able to see them. All right, and so the top of the window is going to be this orange line. Might as well, we have it already drawn. So until it touches, right here, until it touches the curve, oops, I made it go a little too far. So this is actually where the window starts, this corner here. So there we go. And then this line down here. Okay, so now if you can imagine, all of this here, this is all the window. So this is a window, nice curved window. And now I am going to add a maybe like a desk on the other side where the these guys are. I'm also gonna draw limitations of this room because if I hide the guides, it's not there. So I need this right there. So this corner of the room, that corner of the room. And actually, there's a couple more things I need to erase in here to clean this up. So now I'm gonna add a desk. All right, if I want to line up this desk with the the window, what I can do is start the desk from the very corner of the window here and extend it. And then I have my my sizes here, so I know that this guy's 6 feet tall, so 3 of those halfway point here. So this length here is about 3 feet. So I'm gonna go and maybe have a desk that's like 2.5 deep. So actually happens to land up right on this line here that I can use. So that's what I'll do. So you can always reuse convergent lines if you have some that happens to work perfectly for you. So this is going to be the limitation of my table there, my desk. Maybe I'll continue it a little bit on this side here, all the way, actually. And then maybe it will curve. So maybe it'll go like this, and then like this, just to make it a little bit interesting. And then I can add some extra guide for the corners of this new shape. And I don't need anything else. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So now I can create the height of this. It'll go all the way down to the floor. And same thing here. This line is going to go all the way down. This line here might as well. And then this is the other side, the edge of this desk. And then if the guys are getting in the way a little bit, that's why always try to draw them as lightly as possible. Or you can always drop down the opacity if you're working with layers, so that they're not in the way. They're just kind of just almost there, so that you can still see them, but they don't get in the way of your drawing. And now I have a nice desk in there. So there we go. Nice window. So maybe that window is going to have a little bit of depth. So maybe it digs in a little before it actually is the window. Maybe something like this. And then I'm going to need an extra convergent line for the new corner. So every time there's a new corner here that doesn't land on a convergent line, you'll want to draw one. Create a straight line. We'll stop right here. And now I have some depth to my window. So the window extends a little bit beyond this. So I can erase this line here. Maybe just leave a hint of it, just in case. And then the window is there. So maybe it'll curve also. Edges right there. All right, so now I have pretty much all the main elements in my scene there. Of course, you can add many more, but we're gonna keep it at that, to keep it simple. And then we're gonna start adding details. So actually, there's one more that I want to add, something on the floor. And maybe like a door in the back right there. So what I'm gonna do here is the door is very simple. I know that this height here, just slightly above the horizon line, is 6 feet, and so I'm going to go maybe halfway to the roof, and this is going to be the size, the upper edge of my door, and then I'm gonna go all the way down to the floor. So super simple. And then this way the character, if there's a person in here, should easily fit in this door and not bump his head. And so I'm gonna actually curve the corners a little bit, make it look a little bit more sci-fi. All right, now we have a door. We have a window, so we could definitely add some extra windows. So maybe I'll add some more, in the back here. So I can use the same line, the bottom line of the window here happens to be this convergent line here. So if I follow it all the way to the side, all the way until it reaches kind of like the back wall of this room, now I can extend it, horizontal line, all the way here. So I know that this is going to be the bottom of the window. And what I can do here is just maybe extend it up like this. Maybe it'll go as high as the door itself. And then bring it back here and then follow maybe the curve. Just like that. Alright, so now we have a nice window. We can erase this here. We don't need that. Now we have a nice window at the back of the room and a door. And maybe I'll add some extra lines on the floor to add some, maybe not a carpet, but maybe like a trap or like an exit, like an emergency exit or something like that. Or just adding some cool sci-fi lines. Now we have a nice room with a bunch of stuff in it. And now's the time to add some details. So now when it comes to time to add details, it's actually a lot simpler now that we have a bunch of reference lines in the drawing itself on top of all the convergent lines that we've drawn in the scene. So now we don't have to draw new convergent lines for all the detail. We can actually use like the lines that we already have as reference. So for example, if I'm going to maybe draw a drawer maybe on this unit here. So maybe it's going to be like a little hole here going all the way up where that person can sit. So like kind of like the desk area. And then it's going to stop about here. Then we can draw a straight line. Since this line is so close to the other one, we can almost just do it like a parallel one. So something like that, that looks about right. And then we didn't have to draw a new convergent line for those two corners that we created, but no big deal. And then same with this. I'm gonna go maybe all the way up here. And there, so that's going to be kind of like the back limit of my desk. And then again, you could easily do another convergent line to touch this edge right there. But I'm just gonna make a straight line that matches those two lines right here. So something right in the middle, right? So maybe something like this. Again, better if you draw it properly, but at this point, if you have a lot of stuff in the scene, you can kind of just eyeball them. And as long as it doesn't look completely off to you, then it's probably good enough. And we're going to do the same thing for all the details. So if I want to add, like extra, like I said, like maybe a drawer on this unit here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow the line down here. Maybe take this line and draw something in the center that looks just about right, following that line. And now I have kind of a drawer in there, and I didn't have to follow any convergent lines. So yeah, this is kind of how you save time when you're at the detail phase, since you have so many guide lines already, that you don't have to create new guides for everything that you draw for all the small details. Sometimes maybe like on the right side there, there's some big areas where I don't have any convergent lines. I might want to add some when I get to that point, but yeah, for a lot of the details, you start with big blocks, and you make sure that you measure those so that the base at least is accurate. And then when it comes to time to detail, you can eyeball most of it, and it should look pretty accurate, given that you have enough construction lines in there. All right, and we're gonna take a little break here to look at something that's pretty important. So I've kind of touched on it a little bit when I did the corner edge of my wall, the curved wall. But we're going to look at how to draw circles in perspective. So this is going to allow you to draw almost anything. You'll be able to draw cylinders. You'll be able to draw like a half, like half corners, like half cylinders, and concave things. And so it's a really, really important shape to learn. And it's a little bit tricky to do, but once you know how to do it, should be pretty straightforward. So it'll just need a little bit of practice so that you can become faster and faster at it, and spot kind of when you're making a mistake and when the circle in perspective is not looking quite right. So you'll be able to pick up those mistakes a little bit easier the more you do it. So I'm going to do this in a way that if you're not using a If you're not using Photoshop, you'll still be able to do it. So of course, if you want to deform a circle using Photoshop, it's actually really simple. So let's say you have one right here. Actually, I'm going to draw another one. But let's say you want to draw a circle like this within the boundaries of this plane right there. So one way you could do this, if you're using Photoshop, you can just draw a circle like this, create a stroke, and then you Control T to deform, and all you have to do is match those corners. So you control and snap the corners to those same corners. Oops. To those same corners right there, and then hit enter, and there we go. You have a nice circle that is in proper perspective. So that took 2 seconds, really quick. But that's not what we want to do. We want to be able to draw this on our own. So to do this, what we are going to do is first we need to place this circle in a square. So squares, if you don't have a square, you can't use you can't do much. You need a square to be able to draw another square and then draw the circle inside it. So like with everything, it always starts with a square. So we're going to look at what we have right here. So we'll want to place this circle here inside of a square. So we're gonna start with the edge and then extend those lines until they cross right here. Something like that. All right, and now we have the corners of our box. So this is going to be important because this is the first thing that we'll draw if we want to draw a circle. So we'll draw a box first. So in this case, you would draw these dots first, this shape first, this square first. And then to find the center of this shape, we can draw diagonals. So like this. And we have the center now at this right here. And now we'll also want to split this into 4 quadrants, initially at least. So 1, 2, make sure it's fit, it lands right in the middle right there. And then we'll, right now what we need to do, and we can already see that we have 1 point here, 1 point here, 1 point here, 1 point here. So now we have four guides, within the circle. We know that at the halfway point here, at the halfway point, we'll have 4 dots like this. But it's pretty tricky to draw a circle with only 4 dots, especially if it's in perspective. So if it's flat like this, then it's not so hard, but like this, to create something accurate, not the easiest. So we'll want to add 1 more in between. So 1 more, 1 more, 1 more. So this way, once we have all those points, are going to be a little bit easier to draw. So once we have like 4 dots to connect. And for this, we'll have to find out where exactly is this intersection. Where does it land? So there's no real good way to figure this out, especially if we're just gonna if we're not approaching this from a very scientific point of view. So it's going to be an approximation. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a perfect science, but it should be close enough that we're able to reproduce a pretty good circle on any kind of surface, any kind of perspective. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to split this in even more. So in this one box, this one quadrant, we're going to split it in 8 pieces, in 8 parts. So we're going to go halfway, and then half again. Like this, and then we're going to do the same thing here on the other side. Make sure that it's in the center, and then in the center again. And then we're going to do the same horizontally. All right, and then if everything lines up, you should have some nice intersections right here and right here. All this should line up, they should end up being crossing right there. So now that we have a nice grid for this, let's see what we have. So the way I like to think of this is, once we have those 4 squares right here at the corner of this bigger square, try to look for the shape here. So it always gives you kind of like a small triangle, just like that. And this is what I like to think about whenever I draw the circle in perspective. So I want to make sure that the circle lands inside those small triangles while touching the corner of the triangles, the edges of the box that the circle is in. And yeah, so something like this. So now that we have those guidelines, we should be able to draw the same on this square, and this should give us 8 points that we can kind of connect to be able to reproduce a circle. So we are going to try that. So first things first, we'll want to find the center of this square. So once again, we're going to trace using straight lines our diagonals, touching all corners. All right, so the center part is right here. And then we're going to use convergent lines to find the the vertical ones. So right down the middle, right here. And then again, we're going to split this quadrant in half, and then this other one in half again, like that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, split this in half, and then again. And then from there we have all these intersections here that we need, so we can just extend the lines from there. So horizontal ones, and they should all line up. Click, click. All right, there we go. So now we have the grid drawn on here. So this point here is going to be this one here. That one is this one. That one is that one. That one is that one. And now we need to find out where those triangles are. So if we remember here, the first square, you'll have a small triangle like this, right? So triangle number 1, triangle number 2, small one back here, small one back there. And then now we have all our guidelines that we need. So we have the 8 points. We'll be able to trace a nice circle like this if we connect them all. So in this case, the circle is a lot bigger, so it's going to be a little bit tricky. So we might need a little bit of back and forth, trial and error. But essentially, we want to start from here and then go on the inside of the triangle, and then touch right here the edge, bring it back. Touch the inside of the triangles. Keep going all the way until the side. And now we have half of it done. I'm gonna keep going like this. So that's nice and curvy. Keep going. Touch here, just touch the edge, and then back. And the inside of this triangle. And that should give us a pretty accurate-ish a circle in perspective. All right, so the beauty with this is that I can actually correct myself if I made a mistake, because remember I did this version here. So not 100%, but it's pretty close, right? So the margin of error there is totally acceptable. So maybe here the red curve should go a little bit in, a little bit more, and this one should curve a little bit more, but everything else is right on the money. So, I mean, this is how you do it. You start with drawing this grid here, split, a grid split in 8. So in 8 parts, of course, you don't have to split the center here because there's nothing there. Just split the edges, so the outer squares, and then place those guidelines, place your 8 points and your 4 points and your 4 triangles, and there you go. and then you just connect the dots as best as you can. And then this technique should work on any angle, so you should be able to do the same thing on this wall here, for example, you know, if you were to do it on here as well. And this is how you draw circles in perspective. And of course, you know, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to draw circles all the time. Sometimes it might only be like a half circle, but the same guidelines apply, the same rule applies. And maybe it'll be only like a quarter of it, like a quarter of a circle. Again, the same deal. So the way I did it for, you know, my curved wall, since it didn't need to be like a circle, it just needed to be a curve. In my case, you know, I didn't draw a grid this complex. But if you want to draw a circle, something that's circular, not just some random curve, then then use this kind of grid, and it should give you pretty good results. So of course, you know, you're not going to be able to draw this curve as perfectly as the real deal like this one every single time. And of course, you know, if you're just starting with this, it's going to take you a couple times. But yeah, keep practicing, and then the more you do it, as I said, the more you'll pick up on your mistakes. The more you'll be able to look at this and tell if it's, yeah, is this correct or is this not correct? And then if it's not, you'll be able to tell that it's not, and then you'll be just able to, you know, keep working on it until it is. And yeah, the more you do it, the better you'll get. So now back to what we were doing. So here I am again, like I said, in a really good spot to start adding details. So most of the big shapes in my room are there, and now I am going to just start adding more stuff. So of course, you know, it helps if you have reference, like a photo reference of what you're doing. In my case here, I'm just winging everything, so there's going to be a little bit of trial and error, and then, you know, of course, it's not gonna be an amazing concept because I'm not really focusing on that. I'm just kind of drawing random shapes in perspective and hoping that it looks all right. Yeah, no, if you are drawing your room, you know, take a photo of it, or a photo of whatever you're about to draw, and try to take the photo in a similar angle as the one you're gonna be drawing it in, and yeah, draw what you see essentially. So I'm going to let this play, and you know, it's going to be in real time, and so you can see exactly what I'm doing. But it's not going to be any other lessons, you know, as far as the rest of this. It's going to be just me adding details, and then in some cases I'll use you know, convergence lines if I am missing the proper lines to do something. But for the most part, I'll just be using the lines that are already there. And yeah, but one point perspective is actually pretty simple once you've gotten this far. And again, you know, when you draw something like this, always make sure that you have a character in there, or at least a measure of something, so that you know what your distances are in real life. So don't try to wing this, you know. Make sure that, okay, to know that the table or the desk is about like 3 feet tall. The character itself, if there was one in your scene, would be about 6 feet, you know, whatever it is, however tall he is. And then if you have a chair, you know, the chair should be about, you know, look at your own chair, you know, how high it is when you sit down. And do your measurements like this for all the important things that need to look right. There's certain things, like I said, you know, like cupboards and, you know, like drawers and things like that don't really need to be as accurate, because they can be any size most of the time. You know, there's no like a proper size that they should be at, unlike a chair. Like most chairs are the same size for a reason, because that's what's comfortable. So if they're not, it's something that a lot of people will be able to pick on, and they won't know exactly what's wrong, but they'll be able to tell that something is wrong because they've seen chairs so many times, right? So we're kind of conditioned to know if it's right or wrong when we see it. We might not be able to see exactly to pinpoint what's wrong, but we'll know something is wrong. Yeah, for those things, like a bed, like the chair, like the height of a desk, like the width of a door, the height of a door, and any other thing that you can think of that normally has a fixed size, make sure that you measure it, so that, you know, for sure that it will look correct. Because that's the one thing that everybody that starts with perspective, to play with perspective, that's the number one mistake that everybody does, is to have, you know, different objects be the wrong size placed in the environment. But yeah, it's just a matter of having a character in there, and at the at the very beginning establishing those distances, those lengths, those proper measurements, and you should be gold. So yeah, like I said, I'll let it play. So hopefully you have all the tools to be able to create your own room. All right, I'll catch you later. All right, and right before we end right there, there is a mistake in this image. So it wasn't on purpose actually, so my bad. But yeah, there's a problem, a perspective problem in this room. So I want you to try to figure it out if you haven't yet. So you might have noticed as I was drawing things that things didn't really line up, and I kind of picked up on it as well. But it was pointed out by well, my wife first. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds here to pause the video and try to find out for yourself what the issue is and where it is. And for the rest of you, I am going to like troubleshoot the problem, and then we're going to look at what it is and how to fix it. So it's actually going to be a pretty interesting process because it's something that happens all the time. Yeah, we're going to look at how to fix it in the easiest way possible. So first things first, we're going to spot where the problem is. So I'm going to create a new layer here, and I'm going to use convergent lines to figure out, well, let me bring up the old one here. So by me drawing these lines right there, you're probably starting to guess where the problem is. It is with that desk on the left side here. So what I am going to do with this is recreate the shape of the desk, and then we're going to see what the problem is exactly. So if we look at this, this area right there, something is not quite right. So we have the desk area, the end right there, this line here, this would touch the wall, and then that would be the end of it. But then it continues, so there's this this portion here that really is not making any sense whatsoever. This doesn't actually make sense because the wall ends right here, so this is the end of the wall. That would be the corner of the room. And then what would this be here? So it means that this desk, instead of being inside of the room, is actually pushed the wall on the left to it's pushed the wall to the left a little bit more. So we're going to try to fix this. So first things first, we're going to draw the right lines and see what we can do from there. So I'm going to draw the corner of this room again right there. So that would be it. So all the stuff here, that would make no sense. So we can erase that stuff because that has no room, that has no place there whatsoever, because it's not correct. And then I can extend those lines right here, maybe all the way to the end. So that would be touching the corner of this room, maybe something like that. All right. And now we can see the real problem here is this desk here, this portion of the desk, it just goes inside of the wall, and then that doesn't quite work, right? So now it's even more noticeable. So those lines here don't work, so I need to erase that. That surface there cannot possibly exist, and then that opening for the wall, that opening here doesn't work either. So I'm going to erase all of that stuff. Okay, so now the obvious fix for this, so it would mean taking this whole thing here, taking the entire section of the desk, and essentially bring this to the right. So push this inside of the room, so you can see here the corner right there would match with the corner of the room, right? So that would be correct. And now we just need to kind of erase, this thing here, and that would be more like it. So I could make it work this way. But what I'm going to do, and this is actually probably like a nightmare if you've drawn this on paper and you have to redraw this entire section here. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to try to find a quick way. I'll tweak the design of the room so that I can make this work without having to redraw this entire section because I don't want to do that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider that this room is a little bit wider than it actually is. So what I am going to do right now, if we look at this room from the top, right, the floor plan for this room is a square. It's like this. Not a square, but a rectangle. So if we look from the top, we have the doors right here, right? So this thing here, that's the door. We have the bed,
something like around this area. And then we have this desk here, this whole thing that starts about here, and then goes like that, and then touches the wall. Right? So this is kind of like the layout of the room. And what I'm going to try to do is change this a little bit to make the perspective work. So the change that I'm going to do is, if we duplicate this over here, I'm going to get rid of this portion of the desk in the back here, and instead introduce a new section to the room back here. So it's going to be like this instead. So this could be like a different room, you know, like it could go anywhere. It could be a different like a bedroom, a different like a kitchen or something, whatever. But essentially right now we see this, and I'm going to move towards this thing here. So I'm going to erase all this stuff right here. So all this portion of the counter is now going to be, it's not going to exist anymore, because this is actually going to be a hole now. Instead, you know, instead of this being the corner of the room, I'm going to extend this all the way back here. And same thing for the ceiling here. So it would continue like this. So this line that I'm drawing here, this is the same line as this one. So this is the top of the room, right? And instead of curving like this, and instead of, you know, that being the room, you know, like this, like just a wall like this, this portion here and this portion in the back is just it keeps going. And the same down here. And then now the only thing that doesn't work anymore is this pipe here. It's just floating there. Doesn't make much sense. So I'm going to erase the tip of it and see where it actually lands properly. So I'm going to draw a line here that touches the wall. So this is the wall right here. This goes down to the floor, and then this is the base of this thing here. So if I continue this line up here, it should land about right there. So that should be where the pipe connects to the wall. So before it wasn't even correct. So the pipe was another problem. It wasn't long enough. Yeah, if it's on the same plane, it would land on the wall right here at about this spot right there. So there we go. So now things are correct. This room is not broken anymore. It's not deformed anymore. It actually works. And to make that a little bit more obvious, you know, that you can actually go behind here. So you could have someone here standing, and you would be behind the desk, right? Just standing there. So to indicate this a little bit better, I'm going to add like a plant or something, right, to indicate that there's something there in the back. And it'll give the impression that there's something more back there that you can actually go check out. And maybe something's coming out like this, to also indicate that something's happening back there, that the room doesn't end at that wall. All right, and then there we go. So now this would work, finally. So I can add a couple more details. Something like that. All right, now so this works a little bit better. And then we can see here, you know, back here where the tree is. In this case, the tree would be right about here. And then you could go and, you know, whatever, maybe there's a big room, like I said, back here. So now this would work. Now things are not broken anymore. And this is a quick fix. You know, as you saw, it's only a couple lines to move around. And it's in the back of the picture, the back of the room, so it's not as noticeable as something that would be right up front in the foreground. So we avoided a terrible disaster, and we're able to fix it and actually add something to this room. So it's actually now a little bit more interesting, because we know that there's an extra room there that we can't see. So it adds a little bit of mystery, and yeah, all in all, it's a good problem to have, because it actually ended up making the drawing a little bit more interesting. So now this would be correct.